and it is my great pleasure to moderate this event today. What an honor to chair this event on the International Day for Elimination of Violence Against Women, and as here in UN, we call it Orange Day. It's an Orange Day with a vision for a brighter and orange future without violence against women and girls. That's why you see me wearing my orange scarf today. I'm delighted to be able to be here today and discuss today's topic, which is an issue that is really long-standing passion of mine, which is funding and accountability to girl-led and women's rights organizations and movements around the world. But before we begin with the event, please let me cover just a few housekeeping points. So first, I'm going to ask you if you can please put your cameras on just for a second, so that we can see you all and that we can see these amazing workers that are working around the world to end violence against women and girls. Yes, please, 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 please. Please put your cameras on. The more we can see you, that will be fantastic. Don't be shy. Thank you. Great. Don't be shy. Great. Thank you. And now, I'm going to ask you to please keep your videos off to help with the bandwidth. As you all know, the internet is a bit shaky these days. And also, if you can please keep yourself muted during the event, unless invited to speak. I want to let you know also that the event will be recorded, and I encourage you to use the chat function to contribute to the conversation. Please don't hesitate to put your comments in the chat, and this is an opportunity to also highlight that today's event is about questions, but not that we will have all the answers. It is really about discussion, so please do feel free to put your comments in the chat box. When we get to the open discussion a little bit later, you'll have the opportunity to share your comments. And please, I also want to ask you to have your phones ready for a very short and interactive game we have planned. But about it a little bit more later. So why we are here today, and why is this issue of violence against women and funding for women's rights organizations and girls' organizations matters? Well, with the surge in gender-based violence in the wake of the COVID-19, the case for resourcing organizations on the front lines of the GBV response has never been more important, as we have all witnessed that this year. I'm really continually humbled by how rapidly women's rights organizations adapt their work to meet the urgent needs of women and girls, and to mitigate the risk of violence, often in very challenging circumstances. In the UN Trust Fund to End Violence Against Women, where we work, we have seen the proof of that over and over again during this year. These organizations are really centering and amplifying the lived experiences of voices of survivors, including those that are facing intersecting forms of discrimination. We all know that this is crucial and life-saving work. And as I said, during the COVID, we have seen how quickly those organizations can adapt their projects and programs, shift the focus in order to support survivors, but also to keep their organizations alive and working. And yet we all know that data and research suggests that particularly women's rights organizations remain chronically underfunded. And often they are locked out and left behind from decision-making processes, be that at the national or international level. So we know this has to change, and this is not negotiable as far as I am concerned. And we need to come together to address and resolve this issue. To that effect, the new global multi-stakeholder action coalition on gender-based violence is really an exciting opportunity to come together and urgently galvanize, increased funding for and accountability to the girls-led and women's rights organizations and feminist movements, but also to ensure the intersectionality, the survivor-led approaches, demand-driven priorities, and those need to shape the global agenda on the ending violence against women in the next 5 years. The Action Coalition on Gender-Based Violence, as many of you probably know, is one of the 6 that is being launched in 2021 as a part of Generation Equality Forum to mark 25 years since the landmark Beijing Platform for Action. Woman is honored to be among this fantastic group of partners that are co-leading this new Action Coalition, and along with the co-hosts of today's event, the government of Kenya, the United Kingdom, the Ford Foundation, Breakthrough, and Yes Trust Zimbabwe. And I'm very pleased that several of the other co-leads of the Action Coalitions have also joined us today, and I wanted to thank them for the opportunity to moderate this fantastic event. Work is now underway among the Action Coalition's leadership group to define the 3 to 4 concrete actions that all Action Coalition will prioritize over the next 5 years. Before I go forward, if I could just please ask you to mute your mics, because I can hear some noise in the background. Thank you. So let me just say that today, what is today's event really focused on is to champion the meaningful participation and leadership of the girl-led and women's rights organization in shaping the priorities of this Action Coalition. For us, this is also an opportunity for co-leads to learn how the lived experience of diverse women and girls across the different contexts affects our work. Crucially, it is also an opportunity to hear directly from girl-led and women's rights organizations, many who are present here today, about their own recommendations for which action actually we should be taking in the next 5 years, and what concretely this Action Coalition on gender-based violence should do, could do, to improve funding and accountability to organizations on the front lines that are tackling gender-based violence. Of course, we have to underline that Action Coalitions can't do everything, but this conversation today is really an opportunity to think strategically about that. How Action Coalition can add value to what's already happening on the ground, and many of you are working on that today and every day, and what concretely we can achieve over the next 5 years specifically to really, as we say, move the needle, to accelerate the progress. So without further ado, please let me introduce Action Coalition's colleagues who are co-hosting this event today. Professor Margaret Kobia, who is the Cabinet Secretary in the Ministry of Public Service and Gender in Kenya. I don't know, Professor Kobia, if I can ask you to put your camera on, please. I'm not seeing it. Baroness Sugg, who is a minister at the United Kingdom's Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office with responsibility for gender equality, and is the UK Special Envoy for Girls' Education. I can see, yes, hi there, hi. Then we also have with us Martin Abregu, who is the Vice President for International Programs at the Ford Foundation. Martin, I don't see your camera on. Ah, here we go. Yes, hello. Hi, good morning. We have Sohini Bhattacharya, who is the CEO and President of Breakthrough, a global human rights organization working to eliminate violence against women and discrimination against women. Sohini, hi, there you are, hello. And we have Rutendo Mutongwizo, sorry Rutendo, who is an innovator against gender-based violence, Yes Trust Fund. Oh, no, sorry. Of course, I will say Yes Trust Fund. I always think Trust Fund. At Yes Trust Zimbabwe, one of the gender-based violence Action Coalition youth representatives. Hi there. Sorry about that. Hello. Good to see you. So now it is my great honor to first invite Baroness Sugg for the welcome and opening remarks from Action Coalition colleagues. Baroness Sugg, as we say in the UN, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Diana, and thank you for setting out so clearly why it's so important that we all gather today. And it's a real pleasure to be with you all to mark Orange Day, the International Day for the Elimination of Violence Against Women and Girls. And it's a privilege to be having this conversation with such courageous leaders in this field. I share your outrage that the violence has hit millions of women and girls, and they suffer every day, and we remain steadfast in our determination to help change this. And we know that this is more important than ever this year, as COVID-19 has intensified the shadow pandemic of violence against women and girls. This is deeply worrying, but it's also made me even more determined to keep fighting for an end to this violence. Growing evidence, including from the UK's What Works to Prevent Violence programme, is now backing up what you all know, that we can prevent violence against women and girls. I'm continually impressed by the pioneering work that you all do to adapt prevention efforts and to provide the vital services for survivors in the face of such unprecedented challenges. The United Kingdom is honoured to co-lead the Action Coalition on GBV with Kenya and other fantastic partners. I've been so impressed by Kenya's leadership on FGM, and I know that the UK has much to learn from all of our co-leads. It's really important to me that girl-led and women's rights organisations are able to meaningfully participate in shaping the Action Coalition, and that your priorities and recommendations are heard and acted on. And that's why the UK came together with Kenya and other co-leads today to co-host this important dialogue. I'll be listening carefully to your priorities and will do my best to champion these through the UK's leadership of the Action Coalition. I'm proud that the UK is recognised for its global leadership on violence against women and girls, but I'm not complacent. I know we've got a long way to go. Early next year, the UK will be launching the first ever global effort to systematically scale up proven violence prevention approaches through our What Works to Prevent Violence Impact at Scale programme, and that will be the largest investment by any single donor government to prevent violence globally. We know that success will depend on putting women's rights organisations on. That's why the UK announced additional funding in September to violence against women, which will help provide long-term support to women's rights organisations on the front line, including those representing the most marginalised women and girls, such as those with disabilities. I was also proud to recently launch the next component of our multi-year UK aid package to support the Africa-led movement to end FGM. And that's going to be an exciting new partnership with the grassroots movements at its heart. We know we need to go further, and that's why my department, the FCDO, is exploring sustainable funding models to support grassroots women's rights organisations, which we hope to start next year. Globally, we are in particularly uncertain times, but I'm determined that the UK will continue to play its part with others to increase funding and accountability to girl-led and women's rights organisations and movements. I want to continue to learn from your deep knowledge and expertise to guide and shape the work of the Action Coalition and to challenge us if we go off track. Ending violence against women and girls is a long-term endeavour that can only be achieved through support for locally generated change, led by women and girls themselves. This is something I believe in passionately and I will continue to advocate for. I look forward to hearing directly from you, and I'm really excited about what we can achieve together over the next 5 years. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Baroness, for your determination, for your commitment, but also for your readiness to be challenged, which I'm sure today we will all be, judging by the list of our speakers we have today particularly. Thank you so much for that. And I would like to invite now Mr. Martin Abregu to deliver his remarks. Mr. Abregu, the floor is yours.
Thank you, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I am Martin Abregu, and I'm the Vice President of International Programs at the Ford Foundation. And it is a pleasure to welcome you all. As one of the colleagues of the Action Coalition on Gender-Based Violence, Ford is committing to end their GBV. And so it's particularly important to welcome you to this event on these days of all days, International Women's Day, and the start of 16 days of activism against GBV. The global 16-day campaign is particularly significant to us because of the elimination of gender-based violence is a key priority for the Ford Foundation as part of our commitment to addressing the systems and structures that drive inequality. In fact, the campaign was launched and continues to be coordinated by a long-standing grantee of ours, the Center for Women's Global Leadership. Like the center and many of our grantees here today, and all of us tuning in today, we are committed to women's rights and support for women and girl-led organizations advocating for their rights. Our commitment to this work goes back to the Beijing conference and the Visionary Platform for Action that we are commemorating in this 25th anniversary year. But more than just commemorating, we know the Generation Equality Forum and the Action Coalitions are a forward-looking rallying call for concrete, ambitious, and transformative actions, and for how we achieve progress on gender equality. Like the Beijing Platform for Action, the 16 Days campaign is grounded in feminist values, in the belief that a world without violence is possible. And it links local and global activism by women's rights and girl-led organizations to eliminate gender-based violence. These are also key aspects of fourth international programs on ending GBV. Central to this strategy, as has been said before, is ensuring not only that the work to prevent GBV is sufficiently resourced, but that those resources are directed to efforts led by Global South women's rights and feminist organizations. Because we know from experience and research that it is this work that has been the single most effective driver of changes in laws and policies relating to ending violence. And we know that in 2020, this work matters now more than ever. As we reckon with the global pandemic, this has become a moment of urgency as we witness the pandemic's far-reaching effects globally. We have seen the impacts of COVID-19 and its serious threats to progress on gender equity, and it continues to magnify all existing inequalities. The pandemic has also so clearly shown that it's women's rights, feminist, and youth-led organizations of movement who were the first respondents in countries across the world. Yet, despite this shadow pandemic, there is still not enough spotlight and funding for that matter on this work, and we know we need more. Analysis of funding highlights the stark fact that the organizations of movement working most closely on ending gender-based violence and with the best understanding of needs and priorities are the least likely to receive funding. And not only do they receive the least funding, but they are also left out of the many global spaces and discussions that take place on how to solve the crisis. And it is this commitment to ensuring the diverse voices and priorities of women and girls in the global south are heard and reflected in global conversations and commitments that drives our participation in the Generation Equality Forum, in co-leading the work of the Gender-Based Violence Action Coalition and as a foundation. And it's why we are here today. We know it takes more resources, more partnerships, more investments, more awareness, more commitment. And that's why hearing from you now as we begin to shape priorities and identify actionable commitment is so important. With today's event, we want to start as we mean to go on, ensuring that voices of civil society, your voices are at the center of the transformative agenda of the Generation Equality Forum. I want to thank everyone for joining, for their tremendous partnership, support, and collaboration, and for the work that we have left to do together. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate your words, particularly bringing out points such as the research, partnerships, feminist values, and funding, particularly work in Global South. I'm sure we will hear a lot about that, particularly from the next group of speakers. I'm delighted to have with me today some panelists, amazing panelists, which I'm going to introduce now. And if you can put your cameras on, please, as I introduce you. So first, that's Memory Kachambwa, who is the Executive Director of the African Women's Development, a communications network. As we know it, FemNet. Welcome, Memory. Dr. Maria Al-Abdeh, who is a researcher and Executive Director of Women Now for Development in Syria. Hi. Favor Chukwugolum is a passionate voice for girls' rights in Nigeria and chairs the Adolescent Girl Advisory Boards of Girls' Voice Initiative. is favored with us. And Madhu Mehra, who is a feminist lawyer and researcher whose work over 25 years covers issues relating to gender, sexuality, identity, politics, violence against women, and whatnot. So many issues. Welcome, Madhu, as well. So it is really great to have you all and to have your lenses today on the discussion. And, I have 2 questions for you. So I'm going to ask you all the same question, and it will be very interesting to hear your answers. So I will start with memory. And memory, if you can tell us, what is your top priority or recommendation for an action over the next 5 years to drive long-term transformative progress on gender-based violence? Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. It's such a pleasure to be on this platform on such a day. There's so many issues and so many priorities. I think gender-based violence is one of the most difficult things to narrow into 2 or 3 major points, but I will try. The women and girls are at the front lines. They are really under attack, particularly on issues of gender-based violence. So the first priority that I would like to present and to point is to support women's rights organizations in all their diversity, women living with disability, gender non-conforming persons, feminist movements, young women's movements, including organic and structured movements, and women human rights defenders, and also supporting these movements for regional and global solidarity, but also supporting their organizing on ending gender-based violence. I think it's also important to say addressing systemic gender-based violence, the priority should also to consider the historical, colonial, capitalist, and extractive patriarchal structures and injustices, including inequalities that are upheld by these systems which perpetrate gender-based violence and violence against women and girls. So it's important as a priority to address these historical imbalances. And thirdly, is to also collectively work in pushing back the pushback, increasing accountability to international standards and norms on gender equality, and shifting the negative social and cultural and religious norms, implementing without any reservation CEDAW, Beijing, and here in Africa, Maputo Protocol, and the plethora of legislation and all the standards and policies at the national level as well. The last one is to also ensure that the policies are implemented, prosecutors of gender-based violence are prosecuted, and survivors are protected fully. And to also mention the emergence and prioritization of cyber violence, and to also support the digital movement and the digital advocacy, which has brought to the surface campaigns like Justice for Liz, Bring Back Our Girls, Shut It All Down, Am I Next, Me Too. I'll end and also allow for the other.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Particularly for me, the words that resonate is women human rights defenders and youth. So over to Maria. Can you please now tell us the same question, but different answer maybe?
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, they will be different answer. Yeah, for me, first of all, thank you very much for this invitation and opening the floor for this very important discussion. For me, I will focus in women in conflict. As you said, I'm from Syria, but unfortunately, I'm speaking to you from Berlin. So yeah, like refugee women. And we have also the women who are still inside a very active conflict, unfortunately. So if I close my eyes, I will and think about my priority or what I would like to see for the next coming 5 years. I would really hope that the Women and Peace agenda will be developed toward a more participatory approach when we don't only have protection versus participation in political process. There are two spheres that are completely different. We need the sphere of protection to be supported by women participation. The women that we want to support, to protect, need to participate at all levels of any process, and they should be there in justice process specifically. I would also think on prioritizing investment and mainstreaming women and girls' participation in all sectors, education, medical, security. We have seen in Syria, when we want to work on girls' protection, that schooling is something very important. Most of the teachers are women, but no one of them is on a key decision-making place to be able to take a decision. So sometimes we need to really create to support women getting their degree and accessing decision-making space, but also ensuring that they have safe place for being, or women-friendly space to be able to do their work. Like sometimes very simple things like childcare. We have seen this in Syria impacting very much women rights activists. My third point will be to support legal framework for justice and accountability for SGBV at local and international level. If women don't have any legal framework or any court or any police to go, how we can support them. And when we go to the international community, also sometimes there is so much difficulties for women to access the justice process. So we need to find out what is the barrier for women access and how we can work to ensure that their barriers are resolved within the next 5 years. I will also think on really support legal documentation for women. The main reason a lot of Syrian women today are on very vulnerable position because they don't have documentation, because they are forcibly displaced internally or refugee in other countries. They don't have paper. They cannot. Sometimes they can't even show the paternity of their children, which make their child stateless, and the women themselves very vulnerable to any kind of GBV. My last 2 points will be that all my previous points were about program, but also as someone coming and working in an area under conflict where that is also surrounded by anti-terrorist law, I know sometimes that getting 200 euros inside Syria as a salary for someone who is risking her life to support other women will take sometimes months, will take time and effort that is equivalent for 5 times the same amount. So we really need to think on find solution on access to women rights and women groups under conflict, and to think how we can work on over compliance to alleviate the burden of over compliance. My last dream will be really to support local fund in the Middle East. I have seen incredible local fund in Africa and elsewhere. I think it is time also for women in the Middle East to have their own local fund that is supported so they can decide on their priority. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Maria. That is really great. And thank you for raising the points. And as a refugee woman to refugee woman, I'm from Bosnia myself originally. I totally understand you when you say particularly about participation and mainstreaming the participation, not just bringing somebody at the table as a tokenistic gesture. Totally understand you.
Thank you for understanding.
Thank you for that. And now if I can go to Favor with the same question. I don't see you. Oh, here you are. There you are. Hi. Same question. Over to you. I think you're on mute.
Hello.
Yep, we can hear now.
I'm going to be turning off my cameras for better connections. Is that okay?
That's totally okay. Thank you.
Okay. So I want to speak from a very personal perspective. When I was much younger, I was facing my own gender-based violence ordeal in spaces where I never thought I would experience such. It was a program that was hosted by Girls' Voices Initiative to mark the International Day of the Girl in 2016. That gave me the opportunity to understand that what I was facing was indeed gender-based violence. Now, if I didn't have the right education and tools to demand the protection of my rights, I would have actually ended up being a victim or probably counted as another statistics. Now, when organizations in the front line are equipped, we will have less girls being victims. And it's not just me, but I know other girls that are saved from gender-based violence because they got opportunities we opened for girls to speak with policymakers, which girls will not ordinarily do if that platform was not created. Speaking of platforms, to mark the 16 days of activism in the elimination of gender-based violence on women, we have girls going live on the radio on the 26th of November to the 7th of December to talk about gender-based violence, how it affects them, and also how our government and society can better assist in ending gender-based violence in my country, Nigeria. I want us all to understand that these are opportunities that girls get to be a part of when fundings are made available. Another way to drive long-term transformative progress on GBV is that organizations on the front lines need to better coordinate their interventions in the sense that there should be no duplication of efforts. I understand that we are all passionate, but organizations on the front line of tackling GBV need to have a stricter way of accounting for people that they have targeted and reached, so that other organizations hoping to do a project knows that this particular place or area has been reached. So they need to start having another project there, but rather widen their space and finding somewhere else that have never experienced something like that, where they can carry out their project there. That way, it actually has more impact to a fresh group of people. Or better still, we can all come together to seek for collaboration. We can collaborate to reach out to a large number of girls out there. That larger number of girls are impacted by one project or program.
Thank you, Favor, so much. And first, let me just say big thank you for sharing your personal experience with us, and to show my utter respect for your strength. The one thing is education, and I totally understand and agree with you about opportunities and providing spaces for girls, but your strength is really impressive. Thank you so much for sharing that story with us. And now with
I'm happy to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Favor. And now, same question, Madhu, to you. Over to you, Madhu.
Thank you, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to be on this panel today. What I will talk about is really the kind of problems that challenges that we are facing currently, and then what are the ways of perhaps addressing these to achieve a more transformatory change on the ground. In the last 10 years, we've seen in India as well as in South Asia, I am based in India, is a lot of effort towards filling legislative gaps in gender-based violence. So what we've seen as a result is a slew of laws on sexual harassment, rape, domestic violence, child sexual offences, and so on. And we continue to ask for more laws even now. But what has become an unintended consequence of focusing overly on laws, which was necessary in a sense, has become that gender-based violence is seen, the only response that is seen as legitimate is a legislative or a criminal justice system response. So we've got to a situation where there is an over-reliance on law, and which, as we know, has a very hostile experience and continues to be hostile for women. There's focus on conviction and of the accused and on the accused, and it's taken the spotlight away from healing, recovery, and the victim herself. And what we've seen is, while law is important, how do we reach a point where it's seen as one of the many important things and not the only response to gender-based violence? How I think the challenge before us in the coming 5 years is, how do we spotlight causes and consequences of gender-based violence and place them on as state responsibility that carry as much seriousness as weight as the criminal justice system, because there are limits to law itself and there are limits to legal redress. And I would argue that legal redress is not holistic justice for women, even when there is a conviction. The second issue is that in getting attention on children and young people, what we've created is created a legal regime of overprotectionism and absolute protectionism, which means no exception laws. And I mean here laws on child sexual offences as well as laws on child marriage, which have now become synonymous with no exception and zero tolerance approaches. And I will say why these are dangerous, particularly when they negate that children under 18 have evolving capacities, and the child at 16 is very different from the child at 5. And in negating evolving capacities, what we've seen is these laws do not allow children the right to be heard. They have no say in defining their violation. And in South Asia and in India, we've documented so much evidence of the law being used or being weaponized by parents to punish adolescents for sexual expression, for consensual, non-coercive sexual expression. And we also see that the law is not used as much for real instances of violence. So I would say that this is a time for stock taking and for focusing towards adolescent citizenship, towards seeing that at any cost, when we are talking about violence against them or adolescent protection, it never discounts their evolving capacities, their right to be heard, and their right to accessing sexual and reproductive health information and services on equal footing, if not more, as adults. With that, I'll end. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madhu. It's a really great, and I'm so pleased you brought out the question of over legislation, over law focus, and particularly issue of causes and consequences and the due diligence of state to address those issues across the board. So we have come now to the second question, but given that we're really tight on the time, and also that in your previous answers to my first question, you've already focused on some of the answers potentially for the second question, I'm going to ask you that in a second answer, you give me just really succinct, oh God, I never could learn that word, very short and brief and clear intervention and specific. So even if it's just one word. So my first memory coming back to you with this second question, and it is about what concretely should the Action Coalition do to improve funding and accountability to organizations on the front line. And I think really very simple, in a few words, what do you think concretely Action Coalition can do? You have like 1 minute to answer my question. Over to you.
I cannot overemphasize the need to invest and increase funding to women's rights movements, gender non-conforming, and the how. I think the how is really what can the Action Coalition do? So I would just want to propose just a few things. The first one is to really advocate for defunding military budgets and increasing domestic resource mobilization, stopping illicit financial flows, promoting progressive taxation. And I'm saying this because most of the times people ask, where is the money for ending gender-based violence? In Zimbabwe, just quickly, where the HIV/AIDS pandemic, they issued a levy, which they called an AIDS levy. So I really want to emphasize that the Action Coalitions should make ending gender-based violence a state security priority. It should be a state of emergency. In the same way the world has reacted around COVID-19, in the same way resources are being mobilized, in the same way UNAIDS as a global entity was set up. This is what we really want to see the Action Coalition pushing for, the resources. The money should follow the political commitment. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much. That was brief. Maria, can you also please?
Yes, I will try to be fast. So I would say set up dedicated budget, prioritize feminist activists over an INGO, and especially review how you fund so the law and procedure and due diligence don't discriminate. And remember always that it is a mutual shared responsibility of funder and women rights organization to meet that criteria. And we have seen excellent examples on the last 5 years. Lastly, Equality Fund, Global Fund for Women, Gvina Telegvina. We have been through an excellent experience with the FCO and Women League for Peace and Freedom. So there is good examples that we need to follow. For accountability, it will be really essential to build advisory board from women and girls from the front line, and also think about compensate their efforts because they are already overwhelmed. Make the communication more accessible, translate to local language, employ feminists from the region you are working on, invest in economic participation in terms of program, not empowerment, not a humanitarian. When we are speaking about economic rights for women, it's not humanitarian aid. We need more women to participate in economy. And I will repeat the point from the last. We need to think how to overcome the anti-terrorist and over-compliance bank that are impacting the one who are on the front line and who are risking their life to in front of the terrorist and all the very sad environment of war. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Maria, and thank you for succinct answer as well. Now I'm going to go back to Favor with the same question, very specific.
Firstly, the Action Coalition should invest more funds and resources. That cannot be overemphasized, like what Memory said. And for accountability, you as experts of organization, you know how to hold each other accountable, and it's really important to strengthen that process. Yes, we know that they've been reporting and it has been happening, but can we move beyond that and start looking for a more intimate method? The Action Coalition needs to bridge the communication gap between them and the NGOs. We want a sustained flow of communication even when funding is realized. We want to hear inputs, advice on how to improve the impact we have already started creating. It could be a contribution on what went well or what would have been better, so that we can know how to better carry out our projects. Also, the processes of getting these funds sometimes limits fundings to some local organizations. That is why I strongly believe that it is important to include girls in the decision making of which organization gets the funding, because these girls wear the shoes, and I so much believe that they are in better positions to tell where exactly that shoes hurts.
Thank you, Favor, so much. That is really great. And I will recap a little bit after we hear from Madhu as well. Madhu, over to you.
Yes. So I'd say quickly, one is the donor responsibility obligation to reduce the kind of administrative workload of asking organizations to demonstrate outcomes, log frames, impact, and the demands to scale up anything good and apply it in context beyond from where they originated. I do think that it's a merit to even stay running in the same spot. We've seen the world slide back so much, so there is nothing like an impact that one can assure out from a project, but there has to have to be parameters which are much more sort of realistic. Secondly, I would say that donors need to take on the burden of administrating smaller grants. We don't want most of the organizations working on the front line and critical organizations do not and need big money. And so there has to be an understanding that the administrative burden should be borne by donor organizations rather than expecting organizations to scale up and absorb a lot of money, or expecting bigger organizations to become middle players and then they farm out the money. And lastly, but most importantly, we are seeing a real scrunching of civil society space by governments. We've got laws, and in India we've had just another amendment in the last month, which have really squeezed the space and the capacity of organizations to get foreign funds. Yet local funds for the equivalent work are not available. What do? I would say the obligation is on UN agencies whose funds are treated as domestic funds to actually take on the responsibility of giving smaller grants across to organizations, not limiting it to project grants where salaries are not covered, but to allowing organizations to cover their essential costs and just keep running and existing, because as we saw under COVID, the courts were shut, the police were doing something else, and it was only the frontline, defenders who were really available for victims and for highlighting critical issues. So these are the things I would say are of utmost importance in this context. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Madhu. Really appreciate that. And, as we've started talking about this issue, I can see the chat space has just blown up and everybody's just getting involved. So that's great. I see some question about if we can write up these answers, and event is being recorded, but also there will be written readout provided later. The one word that came across all of your interventions was the word invest. And I'm particularly pleased to hear Madhu talking about smaller grants and importance about absorbing some of those costs and enabling small women's organizations to actually operate. And also for the donors to be absorbing some of the administrative costs, because that is impossible then to build the institution of the small organizations if we have them absorbing those costs. I'm particularly happy because the UN Trust Fund focuses very specifically on small grants, and that's the area that we want to see grow. So now I'm going to have help from Chloe, who has been on the line with us and helping with all the chat box, etc. And we are going to use Menti to initiate discussion, with you in the audience and to gather your views, particularly on the first question, which was what is the top priority or recommendation for the Action Coalition for the next 5 years to drive the transformative change. So Chloe, thank you for putting the link in the chat box. You can also put this link in your phones, and you can use your phone or to the website. And there's a barcode there. So I'm just trying to see this link myself now. So there is a barcode that you need to put in a Mentimeter. And Koya, oh, can I just ask you to mute your phone, your mics, please? So the code is 7485241. So 7485241, there's a code and there's a question there. So if you can answer this question, I think we will have a shared screen in a minute where we can then see the answers. If I'm correct, Chloe. Yes, I am correct. So what is your top priority for action over the next 5 years to drive long-term transformative progress on GBV? So we see some of the words popping up, and it's a really fascinating to see diversity of these words, from trauma-informed economic factors, humanitarian agencies, humanitarian support, accountability, political will, increased funding. But you see some of those are really being highlighted as they're coming across from all of you. Investment, intersectionality, prevention, funding. It's clear intersectionality, prevention, and funding are leading in terms of our overall social norms is getting there. Local organizations. Some of those are clearly on all of our minds. Wow, there we go. The intersectionality, prevention, funding, social norms, investment are coming from all of you. And we will, of course, be able to share this with you as well. Again, I'm so kind of comforted to see intersectionality, funding, prevention, social norms coming as we in UN Trust Fund are just finishing our strategy for the next 5 years, and intersectionality was one of the things, one of the focus areas and the words that we have heard in the last year of our discussions with everybody. Everybody is absolutely focused on that. So I think now we can move to the next next part. And as I said, we will share this screen. We will share the findings with you. What I would like now to encourage you to write in the inbox some of your comments and some of your opinions, thinking, so that we can go. Let me see. I think we have Erin Williams from Global Fund for Women. Erin, would you like to come and, please?
Hi, everyone.
Hi,
Can
Erin.
you hear me and see me?
Yeah, I cannot see you, but I can hear you. I don't know if others can, but oh, there you go. I can see you. Why don't you tell us? See your comment in a chat. Why don't you come tell us? Go ahead.
Great. Thank you so much for having me. I was snapping in the background to all of my feminist friends and everything that has been said on this call, and just want to re-emphasize as a feminist fund what is so incredibly critical for us to continue to think about and actually make action forward on. I think as a feminist fund from Global Fund for Women, we situate ourselves in, as what Memory said, the legacy of colonialization and imperialism and white supremacy, and really see funding as reparations and redistribution and the shifting of power. that puts flexible resources into the hands of those who most experience marginalization. And we've talked today about women with disabilities, trans and non-binary folks, intersex folks, and sex workers is also very important. And we know that works, that getting money into the hands of feminist activists works and makes really significant changes on a policy and also social norms level. And we have data that shows this. So it's incredibly important that we continue to think about what it means to not only fund, but also the how. And Memory mentioned that as well. But then the quality of the money is so incredibly important. And so we have to continue to advocate for and mention over and over again that it's funding at greater levels, but it's also the quality of that funding. And the quality of the dollars have to be flexible, they have to be multi-year, they have to be general operating support and core support that allow feminist activists to pivot, to change course, to address crisis like COVID, to respond to rising authoritarianisms, gender ideology, convening and learnings, and also really forging that intergenerational leadership. And so it's important that we as feminists funders continue to think about what it means, the difference between funding INGOs and feminist activists, and another colleague mentioned that today, and funding unregistered and smaller feminist activist groups that are working in conjunction with other organizations to strengthen movements around anti-gender-based violence work and freedom from violence. And I think, I have some more thing. Oh, do I have to get cut off now?
Yeah, I just wanted to give chance to a few more people from the chat box because I see chat box is just exploding.
Okay.
So if you don't mind, if I can, I see here Vangechi, did I say Vangechi Vachira? I think she just put in a box that more emphasis should be put on core funding. Vangechi, do you want to come in?
Yes, I want to come in. Thank you. I hope
I couldn't resist highlighting your question, your emphasis on core funding, because that's a big passion of mine. So yes, please go ahead.
Thank you. I think for me, it's very, very important to put resources to the women's rights organizations and ensure that the funding is flexible. I think my previous colleague, Ellen, has just mentioned that. And this core funding must also be multi-year because a lot of funding is more focused on project, and women's rights organizations who continue to do all the weightlifting. They are stretched with the resources that they have. I think it will be very, very important to ensure that when the resources are put into core funding. I think I also want to emphasize that there is a lot of focus that goes to the response on violence against women and girls. I think this coalition has a big opportunity to put resources on prevention work. And I think there are models that have been evaluated within the region, within the globe, showing that things like cash transfer do prevent violence from happening. I think we must be able to go up the river because I feel a lot of work is being down the river, which is important. But let's go up the river so that we see how do we address issues of gender inequality. So a lot of resources, again, going to prevention work, but also ensuring that the models that are working are resourced. And the funding is not only put for 2 years, support the organizations for a period of 5 years, so that then they can be able to deliver on the work.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Vangechi. I want to go now to, I see in the chat, Erica Hall. Vangechi, can you just have the mic? Thank you. I see, Erica, that you have put in the chat something about child protection with participation and evolving capacity. Erica, do you want to come?
Yeah, sure. Hi, it's Erica Hall from World Vision. I just wanted to make the point that while I agree very much that we don't want to be politicizing or in other ways harming children by creating protection mechanisms. particularly for the most vulnerable children, most vulnerable girls, we do need to have strong protection systems, but also then accompanying that the participation of girls and really, youth-led and adolescent girls movements, where it's more difficult for them to have organizations, obviously, that are then funded. But how do we support those organizations? But how do we, at the national level and local level, ensure that the child protection systems are strong, so that we are hopefully helping to prevent the gender-based violence? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Erica. Really appreciate that. I want to go next to Esther Kimani Zamara. Esther, do you want to come in with your point that you just put in the chat?
Hello.
Hi, Esther.
Hi. Sorry, I don't know if my video will be on. Let me try. Okay. So for me, really, my point exactly is that then we also need to focus on having government resourced facilities like shelters, because when they are resourced by the government, it means that then there'll be a long-term support for those shelters, so that then if there's any violence, the first thing is that we need to get the woman and girls out of the place where the violence has happened. So having a safe space for them that is fully government resourced, that does not depend on the short-term funding that we have experienced in the movement. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Thanks so much, Esther. Please do not say sorry. I hear you have a great advisor there in the background. And thank you for joining us, even though you have a childcare there. I can hear it in the background. I just want to reflect for a second also, again, looking at the charter box. It's really a lot of issues here is about prevention and how we have to be focusing on prevention work and more funding for prevention work. I see here something about rethinking and redefining the language. Memory, this is from you. Thank you so much. We did sustainable. Lubna Bayani, if I can call you in, please. You are mentioning here something about sustainable interventions. And that is something that I'm also passionate about. So would you mind coming in and telling us a little bit more about that?
Hi there, thank you very much. Actually, both on sustainable interventions and the gendered nature of the pandemic. You would never hear any of the men on a video call or a conference with a child crying in the background. But for all the women on the call, you will always hear all of us, apologizing for having our children around us, which is our major work. So thank you very much for calling upon me. And I was just talking about, conditional cash transfers and others. These are all finite interventions. They are only good whilst the funding lasts. What we need is community action, where the communities themselves recognize and accept that change is necessary and wish to work towards that change. Is when change will happen and be sustainable. Otherwise, it's just this colonial top-down. And I can say that because I'm an ethnic minority potentially, that otherwise it'll always be top-down. But for it to be bottom-up, the communities need to say, this is what we want, this is good for us. We no longer want violence in our communities, and we no longer want women to become like men. That is not the goal. The goal is to recognize the differences between men and women and treat us equally with recognition. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Lubna. So how right are you? How many times have I seen since we started doing this new way of working, people apologizing for having a child in the background and trying to work and with the child as well. So we have a few more minutes left in this session. So I'm just going through a lot about core funding. Really, that's very interesting. We have Gabrielle, I'm sorry if I pronounce Zabo. Gabrielle Zabo, great to hear such strong consensus of funding frontline women and girl-led organizations. This will be important for all coalitions. building feminist movements. Gabrielle, do you want to come in and say something about building feminist movements? Why is this important for the Action Coalition?
Yes, thanks so much. So just really quickly, I think it's more of a question to how all of the action coalitions are working together, because I think this core funding and funding of local women and girls organizations will come up for all of the different action coalitions work, but it is a particular focus of that building feminist coalitions one, feminist movements one. So how do we make sure that if a lot of the work on this happens in that coalition, it feeds into all of the different action coalitions? So just a coordination kind of question.
That's an excellent point, really, in terms of when we look at the SDGs, we often say, SDG 5, so that's just where the gender equality sits. And, no, it's across. And I think that's the same point for action coalitions. We will definitely have to take that as a priority to work across all of the action coalitions to look at how this works with violence against women, but also feminist movement building, which is Action Coalition 6. And it is specifically focused on building the feminist movement. I see a lot now coming up on the feminist movement, but I see that somebody is here on this call, and I see that's Cassia from AVID. Cassia, I cannot resist call you in, as I'm sure you will have few things to say, particularly about the funding. I believe AVID has also issued a report recently. Cassia, John, hi.
Thanks so much, Aldiana. I hope that you can hear me well. I'm sorry, I cannot put on camera. I'm outside, but I just wanted to say that it is a fantastic call, and there are so many points that have been brought here that resonate so very much with the work we have been doing in AWID and more broadly with the country in partnership we are part of. And one of the things that really warms my heart is that I've heard a lot about the importance of the how behind the funding, that we have fortunately reached the point where we don't need to make, or maybe we still need to make that argument, but the argument that the feminist movements, women's rights organizations are effective in their work to prevent and end violence, but they're still critically under-resourced. I think that is really appalling that year again, less than 1% of gender-focused ODA reached women's rights organizations in the Global South. That's again the new data from the GenderNet that shows that. And part of the response is about the how. And the work we have just done together with Mama Cash and our partners in country in partnership is to kind of review the number of funding programs that have been funded by bilateral donors and multilateral donors that have managed to move significant amounts of funding, also kind of challenging the myth that it's only the small amounts of funding that women's rights organizations want and need. Indeed, they need small money, but they also need big money, and they can manage that. So I would really encourage you to look for this report. I put the link in the chat, and you can also find it on AWID and Mama Cash website. That's the one thing. And the other thing, as we are also taking part in the Action Coalition 6 on feminist movements and leadership, I think there's also so much convergence between the discussion here and the discussion in this Action Coalition about the feminist leadership, about the funding. So I think moving forward and as the Generation Equality Forum process evolves, I think it would be really important to have us kind of speak together how we can kind of strengthen, reinforce our agendas and our presence in this process. Thanks so much, Aldiana.
Thank you, Cassia, so much, and congratulations on the latest report. I will have to close this section now, but of course, we could talk about this for so long, and there's so much to say. Just to pull out a few more points from the chatter box I see coming out, that's on importance of education, importance of relevance of mental health and violence against women, importance on holistic approach and multi-level approach, the complexity of our lenses to address violence against women. But here I'm going to now go to Ponzo Mafete, who is the Interim Director of Programs African Women's Development Fund. Ponzo, if you are there, and if you would please be able to summarize some of the contributions that you've heard throughout of the event, and give us some of your final reflections, please. Over to you, Ponzo.
Thank you very much. I think I was delighted to be asked to summarise this conversation, but it's been so incredibly rich that it's difficult to know what to focus on. But I think there were some core themes. I think firstly, just to say thank you to Martin Abreu for your commitment. I'm sure through the conversation, your offer to be challenged, you'll have found was very much taken up by the group. I think we have to understand that at the moment in time we are in an extraordinary period in the world, but the impact upon women and girls, I think, is in understanding on how to respond. I think I was really struck by what men refer to as addressing and responding to gender-based violence as a national security issue rather than as a sectoral issue. I think if it gets the same amount of focus and the same commitment, particularly from governments who are on the one hand supporting the militarisation of national governments, which are often most impactful on the world. In terms of who gets funded, I think there was a recognition of the importance of prevention work. There was a recognition of the absolute importance of core funding and the importance of funding not projects but strategies that really make a difference. The role of the law, the role of really understanding the agency of young women and girls, both through what was shared by Matthew and Favour. This concept of collaborating and supporting collaboration, not just duplication, and getting funding decisions made as close to the front line where the work is happening. As the African Women's Development Fund, we support African feminist organisations and movements at the local up to the continental level, and we feel accountable and guided very strongly by the organisations of whom we are a part on the continent. We invest not based on size, because for us it's not bigger is not always better. It is about quality. The obsession with scaling up and getting bigger does mean that money moves away from local, well-integrated, well-representative organisations to bigger organisations who then become the mediators of funding, and I think takes away the accountability and the voice to the women who are all women and girls in communities who are and have always been doing this work. I think the consultation and the representation is a key thing, and I look forward to, as we go forward, and making sure that the money really reaches those organisations. Just as what we just shared about the amount of money that reaches all girls' organisations, 1% is the current figure. It's been that figure for as long as I can remember. So to challenge the FCDO for foundation, Anna, when you say you want to support women's feminist responses to addressing both the prevention and responses to gender-based violence, do you really genuinely believe that 1% of your funding is sufficient to deliver that? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ponzo. And I just wanted to pull one word out of all of the summary, which also resonated with me so much, which is agency. We heard so much about agency during this event. And as we come to the end of the event, it will be really great if we can hear some final reflections from a few more Action Coalition colleagues. So it is my great honor to now invite Professor Margaret Kobia, the Cabinet Secretary in the Ministry of Public Service and Gender in Kenya. Professor Kobia, you have the floor. Over to you.
Thank you very much. You can hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm delighted to join you this time to have this dialogue. on action coalition, and particularly dealing with the issue of gender-based violence. I just want to take my 4 minutes that I divided them into two. The 2 minutes, I just quickly want to say that what Kenya is doing, because Kenya is one of the countries that is leading action coalition. We do realize that gender-based violence, even before COVID, was a great challenge in Kenya, particularly that we know that it is one of the barriers towards gender equality. In the Kenyan experience, we have found that much as we are confronting gender-based violence, we also need to empower women and girls in several other areas like socioeconomic empowerment and maybe leadership and decision-making, also to prepare women around the area of women and peace and security. The reason why we think that approach works for us is we have realized those who experience gender-based violence sometimes are also experiencing other problems. Women who are empowered, I'm saying that gender-based violence, it kind of cuts across, but women who are economically empowered seem to be able to have a voice and confront some of the voices. In Kenya, we have kind of intensified the fighting gender-based violence, and particularly female genital mutilation, which our president is championing to have 0 new cases of female genital mutilation by the year 2022. Therefore, we found that the one new approach that we have started around 4 months ago is where we said we want more of interagency action, where we bring the ministries concerned with empowering women, or in ministries that are dealing with development issues, education, Ministry of Health, Ministry of Labor and Social Services, especially where the Children's Protection are, and the civil society development partner, so that the approach is one which is coherent, and we are able to identify the targets that we want to meet per that year and how we make that progress. I think one new thing that kind of gave us a push is where His Excellency the President of this country directed a research study to be done on what are the causes of gender-based violence, especially during the COVID pandemic. In particular, we realized the incidences had increased by 30%, and for that reason, that study, which was directed by His Excellency the President, shows that political leadership, because if is championed from the high level, then we are able to make a case that even as the country is working on towards development, our gains can be lost if women are kind of disadvantaged because of gender-based violence and female genital mutilation. That study has come up with quite a number of things that are causing gender-based violence. Poverty was number one. Then harmful cultural practices was another cause for gender-based violence. Drug and alcohol abuse. And we also found during COVID, stress and depression is also another issue. Another area that has come up as causing some gender-based bullying is social media bullying, and almost driving away girls and women from the use of social media and internet. And then if that is the way of the future, that is into warriors. Therefore, what I would say that within this established coordinating interagency, we work around the area of prevention, protection, prosecution, and having programs that work around that area, so that we have a whole of government approach in tackling this gender-based violence and the female genital mutilation. Therefore, as a member of Action Coalition, I would like just to say some of the areas that are the action that I've captured as I recently drew a very involving, rich engagement in this call. I had a lot of commitment, especially from Baroness, when she gave a commitment to leading the Action Coalition. I've also heard in the presentation that we need to focus on research and data is key, maybe to form evidence as we are moving forward. I've also had the policy and the legal frameworks that we could have a lot of legal framework, but to what extent are these legal frameworks working? So how do we work maybe with the judiciary to fast track the cases so that the cases, the women also get, and the girls get justice? A lot has come through regarding resource mobilization, especially even Maputo Declaration. And the one area, moderator, we always talk about, we have failed to deliver commitment on gender-based violence because of lack of funding. That we meet every year, we have a lot of commitment, but you only do 50%, and because of lack of resource mobilization. If this particular call can come with clarity, what kind of resources are needed, where do we need them, and how can we harness those resources, I think would be breaking new grounds. I also want to appreciate the work done by women rights organizations and those women-led, and particularly those which try to reach out to men as allies towards this gender-based violence. I also want to concur with the proposals made that we need to work more on prevention. We also need to realize, being in some African countries, a deep-rooted cultural practice, we want to have a very clear theory of change. How do we bring that change? And especially working with the communities. In Kenya, one area that we have worked quite well is working with cultural leaders within the community, religious leaders within the community, to just bring out that this female genital mutilation they believe in, it is harmful to their girls, and also bringing in their young men so that they can also be convinced that their girls or their wives do not have to go through a genital female mutilation. Therefore, I also concur that we should have the message that we are not saying women want to be like men. I heard that, and I'm one person who is always advocating women and the men just want equal opportunity to maximize their potential. I don't, my connection is going a little bit off. I hope, moderator, you can hear me, but I thank you for this opportunity, yes. And I wish to continue championing Action Coalition for new grounds moving towards empowering women and girls. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Kobia. Yes, we could hear you very loud and clear, and thank you so much for you championing this issue and being the co-host and co-chair of the Action Coalition. Now, I would like to invite Sohini Bhattacharya, who is the president and CEO of Breakthrough. There you are. Sohini, you have the floor.
Thank you, Aldiana. And thanks all the speakers for bringing your really valuable voices to this evening's discussion. As one of the leaders of the Action Coalition on Gender-Based Violence, and as an organization working with adolescents and youth champions of gender equality, I echo everything that was discussed, and I share the outrage expressed by everyone. We are in a syndemic situation here. We are fighting a health pandemic, and we are fighting the pandemic of violence against women and girls. I have two themes. One is the theme that all the panelists focused on, and so I'm going to talk about it a little bit, which is funding. So adequate funding for services, preventing, mitigating, and responding to all forms of gender-based violence, and ensuring that services are not withdrawn and diverted during the situation of a health pandemic. This is absolutely essential. So Memory said that how can we channel state budgets towards more progressive funding mechanisms around women issues? And I think there has to be some sort of a advocacy or a pressure group around this for governments around the world. I've been part of a global, advocacy group on violence prevention for a large part of the lockdown, and we are seeking to be an accelerator for the violence against women and girls field, to bring more and better money to evidence-based and practice-informed policies. They're already there, so why ask for more evidence and more practices that are showing results? So they are there. How can we bring those practices and those evidence-based work to the focus and ask for more money for it? Specifically, This also means that not just bringing in more money, but ensuring that the existing money is used effectively for the evidence-based programs, and that new money is directed in the same way, so that there is longevity and there is, results are slow to come in this area, and so that the work is sustained. I think there's also a need to coordinate advocacy within the violence against women and girls field for better and more, money for existing programs, which are already there to prevent violence against women and girls, and for integration of violence prevention into other programming, where they're not looking at it like that. And so we have to develop and disseminate shared advocacy messaging, shared communication materials like story banks, one-pagers, kind of things. Develop a voice, or one voice in asking for all of these. Recognizing that we are talking about deep-rooted cultural change when it comes to gender transformative work on gender-based violence, this needs flexible funding that is, as all my panelists said, multi-year, long-term, supports infrastructure for addressing frontline activists, advocates, digital cyber violence, women in conflict situations, as well as well-being and self-care. These are very, very important when it comes to frontline workers. And two, investments in feminist movements. Like Maria said, prioritizing feminist activism over INGO. Look at examples that are already there, Global Fund for Women, Equality Fund. And let's not corporatize this whole demand for more scale and more evidence and more outcome that we are constantly plagued by. Also funding movements and programs that are non-binary and intersectional. Women living with disabilities, gender non-conforming persons, feminist movements that include organic unstructured movements, women human rights defenders, and regional solidarity organizing against gender-based violence. My next theme is adolescent girls, and specifically the adolescent voices and the meaningful participation of women and girls in this whole thing. Can women and girls have a say in where the money is going and how the money is going? I think Madhu spoke about adolescent citizenship, and we've seen that in our work again and again. You talk about gender and rights to young girls and boys, and you see active citizenship, because they don't think only for themselves, they're thinking for the community, they're thinking for the whole society. Can we highlight that? And can we highlight their need and their openness of society to accessing SRHR support services? I mean, this is such a taboo in many countries, including in India.
We have just 3 minutes left to the end of the event, and I still have one speaker to go.
Right. No, I've said all that I have said, but I just wanted to also make sure that we are talking about supporting girls' access to safe education and safe spaces within schools, and also the transition into the workforce, because it's clear that if all girls were to complete primary and secondary education, there would be a drastic reduction in gender-based violence as well as child forced and early marriages. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, particularly for bringing that education point out as well. And we have one last but not least, Rutendo Mutagungwizo from Yes Trust Zimbabwe. Rutendo, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Yes. Thank you so much. Okay, thank you so much for the opportunity. I'm here. Thank you so much for the opportunity. Hello?
Go ahead, Rutendo, go ahead.
Oh, okay. I would like to thank all the speakers who spoke before me for the insightful points that they raised here. And one of the issues that I would like to talk about is funding. It is important to encourage governments and financial institutions to adopt gender-responsive budgets to ensure that funds are channeled to GBV response or to ending violence against women and girls, and to ensure that funds are being utilized for what they would have access them for. We need to come up with GBV accountability boards that will monitor compliance of rules and regulations, organizational policies and procedures around the service provision. And we also need to encourage organizations to come up with with one package service provision for GBV survivors. That is, you get legal services from the one organization. You also get health services from that same organization. You also, sorry, am I still connected? Hello?
Yes, you are. We can hear you. We can hear very well. Keep going.
Oh, okay, thank you. Okay, another point that I wanted to talk about is scaling deep in addressing systematic issues related to cultural norms and practices, because that's where GBV is heavily embodied. So if we are able to shift from those harmful practices, we are going to eliminate violence bit by bit. And in order for us to do that, we'll need men on board, especially here in Africa. Our systems are heavily embodied in patriarchy. So we need men to be on board to shift from harmful practices to more modern ones, which will ensure that women are safe from violence or from any form of violence. Another point which is also very important is to adopt the intergenerational dialogue approach in a bid to involve all ages and all sexes in the fight against gender-based violence, so that there is cross-pollination of ideas, because what affects a 25-year-old woman is different from what affects a 50-year-old woman. So there is need for that intergenerational dialogue so that we come up with specific solutions to specific issues that women face. I think that was all. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Lutando. Really appreciate it, particularly bringing the point on intergenerational dialogue, importance of connections there. And, you know, a lot of you have also spoke about importance of involving men and boys and their role in all of this. We are now at the end of the program, and I just wanted to check if there are any final brief reaction from other co-leads. I'm not sure if maybe Sarah from UK would like to come in.
Oh, thanks so much. Very quickly say an enormous thank you to everybody that's given up time to meet. I think it's interesting with these events is sometimes you think, are we just preaching to the converted? Are we just telling each other everything we already know? But actually, I've certainly learned some new thoughts. I've heard some really good new ideas today, and I hope everybody on the call has taken away something new, as well as also just got that energy from knowing that you're not alone when you think about these things. And from a government perspective, I can't underestimate the power of you guys continuing to speak up, particularly on things like funding for women's rights. I know it must be really frustrating and hard work, and you think, don't they get it? But please keep speaking up. It's so important. And I think the final thing I just wanted to say is COVID's obviously shone a spotlight on the challenges of GBV, but everyone here on this call, we know that it was here before COVID, and we know that tragically when the world and the media moves on from COVID, GBV isn't suddenly going to disappear overnight. So we have a collective responsibility for the long term, sadly, to make sure that the media, that funders, decision makers know that GBV is a problem, that is a long-term problem, and it needs long-term solutions. And COVID is just one part of a more complicated chapter. But thanks again to everybody. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much, Sarah. And with that, we come to the end of the event today. I would like to just summarize in a few words, and that is 4 words that I'm taking from this event, with all of the knowledge and expertise that have came clearly through and all the issues that have been raised. I'm thanking with today, because we are here starting actually the 25th November in New York. It's only 9 o'clock in the morning here, and we are going into the day. So I'm taking with me the energy, passion, commitment, and determination that I have heard here, and this links to what Sarah has just said about we are here for the long term. COVID will come, it's here, and COVID will go, we know that for sure, but we are staying, we will be here. we will still be dancing and working together on this issue. We will be fighting this revolution. So just wanted to communicate that we encourage you all to come on board as members of the Gender-Based Violence Action Coalition. Once the criteria and process for memberships have been announced, it will be great to look forward to future partnerships. Somebody has their you can please, thank you. We will share with you today what we learned today. There will be some notes coming from this and some of the points that we have raised. And we will communicate back to all of those who registered for this session once, what 3 to 4 actions the Action Coalition has agreed to take it forward and go forward with it. I want to thank all of you for taking the time and for amazing energy and discussions. I could just stay here now all day, which wouldn't be good, and talk about these issues, particularly issue of funding, issue of core funding, flexible funding, issue of women's rights organizations, girls' organizations, feminist movements, youth organizations, etc., etc. But so I wanted to thank first co-hosts for organizing this event and providing this space to talk about it today. I hope this is not, and I know this is not the first one, it's probably the last one. It's the first one in a series of the conversations we will have in dialogues. I want to thank all amazing speakers and all of you who have joined us today. I want to thank you for being here and have a good rest of the day. Thank you.